Okay. Okay. Aloha nui kako, aloha Mōkaulele kako. I want to thank you for biting the hook, this flying hook of Maui. And there's my name is Taupori Tangaro, and I am with the University of Hawaii at Hilo and Hawaii Community College. And if you don't know our university, we're a university spread across the islands with 10 campuses. And so we're on Hawaii Island. This series is Mōkaulele, and it is our contribution to the growing and sustaining and innovating innovations that for Indigenous leadership. And when we say Indigenous leadership, we mean the kinds of leaderships that at every twist and turn of the decision making and actions is for the betterment of our community, the living and the ones that have passed. Our decisions today have to be informed by our ancestors, and they also have to be decisions. Our leadership decisions have to also continue the well-being of our children yet to come. So Indigenous leadership for us, as we define it in Mōkaulele, is about living a life that is healthy and making decisions beginning with oneself and then grow that and grow those actions out to better our community. I am in Panaeva, so you might hear my dogs going back and forth. It's just how Panaeva is here in Hilo, so it's not my family. They're much more tame. We have Kainoa and Embernate with us, and I had the fortunate opportunity to have had him in my class. He rarely ever spoke, but he was just an A student. He sat kind of just there and always alert, but very quiet. But when he did sing, the other side of him came out, and got to see other, the other sides of Kainoa. And then a few years later, he moved to New York, and with social media, we're able to follow him, and we get to see more developments of who this Kainoa is. So we've asked him to come and share his story. Now, typically we take arts, and we use arts as a metaphor to look at leadership development. And so this one, we're looking at language as the art. So we're not looking at graphic arts, we're looking at culinary arts. We're looking at language arts. And a few minutes, about an hour ago, I asked me, hey, maybe you can sing us a song, but it's kind of late right now, 10 o'clock plus in New York, and his neighbor is not going to be too thrilled with him yodeling from his kitchen. So he's gonna talk with us. He's gonna share his story. We hope that the story that he shares perhaps has some of the voices you could use in the development of your own stories. The strengths and advances in his experience, we hope that they reflect yours. And some of perhaps the hardships that he had to go through. And we hope that they too, we can provide an opportunity to celebrate those hardships also, because sometimes it's those hardships that make us the better paddler and get that canoe across. Sometimes we need rough oceans to teach us how well we can paddle and navigate. But without further ado, I think in the chat, they have some instructions for you. So if you could just pay attention to the chat. If you do have questions you may want to ask through the chat, and we'll get you, if we have time, I know can speak to those questions. If not, we also have some, not emails, we have some contact information that you can contact him directly. But auhea oe Kainoa Embernate. Wahiki mai no oe. Aloha.
Hi, aloha. Mahalo ka hui ano kako. I just wanted to acknowledge Iola Honua, Iola Haloa, and Iola Honua. Taupori, Noel, and Auntie Gail, and everybody part of this initiative, this Mōkaulele Leadership Series, for inviting me to just share a little bit about where I came from, where I am, and where I'm going with all my kind kings. So aloha kako.
Yeah, so first of all, where are you from?
So
as we say, no hea mai oi.
I was born in Hilo, and I was raised along the Hamakua coast, mainly in Honoka'a, right below Tex Drive-In. So for
Oh,
those of you who know, you know.
yeah, Honoka'a. Yeah, kaulana kila ʻŌlelo o Honoka'a. Oh, kela lawai'a wahine, he lawai'a e inikipuhi. Yeah, because so much cliff area. So the fisherwomen of Honoka'a, they're known to fish eels. They did it really well. So we mahalo your aina kupuna. Um, we're going to be sharing his story within a framework we call the ka'au. It's a leadership framework. It's based on mythology, the ka'au of Hawaii, but mythology is worldwide. So whether your rooted mythology is Hawaiian or other, you'll find that they all fit. The first is hua. What was his formative years like? We truly believe that the quality of one's formative years will affect our adulthood. So we would want to inquire a little bit. What was your hua like? And at what point, ha'alele, the next point, at what point did you begin to step into your own journey? And we call that the ha'alele, to launch a journey or to take flight. And then we'll ask him to share with us his huaka'i, his journey. What is his journey like? What were some of the yays, I've done it, I'm doing it. And and then some of those question marks like, whoa, did I make the right decision? We all have that. That's part of the assessment of our life's journey. And then as a result of stepping into his journey, what is he doing that benefits our communities today? And again, Indigenous leadership is not just self-fulfilling. It has to, at the end of the day, it has to translate into community success. The reason? We came to Hawaii on canoes in our ancient days. And so many of our success is always based on the health of the canoe or the health of the community, metaphor by the canoe. But also he might be cooking at any point. He might just start doing his thing. Yeah, and so before we begin, Yoho'ina, can you start with Yoho'ina? Tell us, what are you doing now? What are some of the highlight activities that you're doing now that is being available to the community?
Okay, let's see. Right now, I think the greater community, I am an instructional designer at Columbia University at their School of Public Health, at Mailman School of Public Health. So what I do is I meet with the whole department and I kind of help them develop online learning. So I help move that school from in-person to online. I also bake part-time. So after this, I got a couple hours of sleep and then straight to the bakery. And I'll be baking all these delicious sweet desserts, early morning kind things. And then I would call them my passion projects. I have ʻŌlelo, which is, I would say, a free virtual Hawaiian language school. And the idea is that people anywhere and anyone with clear intention to join, they can really navigate their own learning of Hawaiian language with all this kind of courses and other companions along the way, including myself. And more recently, the playground, I'd say, to ʻŌlelo is Mauna Hape, which is a Hawaiian language cooking community I kind of relaunched based on some of my cooking projects in Hilo in 2011 before I left to come to New York. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of share a little bit about what I'm doing with those two things, me oko with you folks. But yeah, that's what I'm up to in my life currently.
Yeah, that at the time Kainoa was in the university, the generation that really started to revitalize was, I would say, in the 1980s. And then in the 1990s, people started, so the earlier part was about learning the language, just learning the language and using, Eurocentric linguistical methods to reacquire our indigenous language. And luckily we have native speakers, and we had native speakers then, only about 2,000 of them in the 1980s. And Gaumakua Kane London's parents were some of those contributors whose domestic language, their first language is Native Hawaiian, so they would come. But back then in the 80s, it was a big thing to just get people to graduate with the language proficiencies and turn them into students, teachers for the Kaiapuni, the Hawaiian immersion language schools. And so, we didn't have much. That was the first base, teach teachers so that we can teach teachers, so we're always teaching, and it was focused on the classroom and then the community work. So when I see that Kainoa is just doing this, I in my mind, this is so innovative. I never thought of this in the 80s or in the 90s, that someday somebody will be in New York and using that become the epicenter for the intentional sharing and learning of Hawaiian language. And with that said, if you got to start doing what you got to do, go for it. So that is what you're doing. You share with us Mauna Hape, and then you have your halau ʻŌlelo, and then you're a designer. That part I didn't know. My uncle used to work at Kaneohe Bakery, and we're from Kahalu'u, so we had to drive him there. And Kaneohe Bakery is closing. But
with Love's Bakery.
With Love's Bakery.
All the bakeries closing.
Yeah, but we used to drop him off early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and you could smell the sweet, bakery stuff. And, and I fancied myself, being a pastry chef, but I would have to live that now through you. So in all the things that you do now, and do you actually even sing still? Or is that something where is that in your life?
Yeah, that's like real private now, because I think when I went to Japan and then did like a month stick over there, that was fun. And then working at Uncle Billy's Hilo Bay Hotel, that was fun. And then, made CD with Brandon Nakano and his wife Emma, that was fun. And then after that, it was just kind of like, okay, cool,
moving on.
Yeah, and now it's just mea ho'olana na'au.
Okay.
Pastime.
Great. Okay. So now in your child, and then again, do what you need to do with it. But in your childhood,
I hear you. I can grab the milk real fast.
Yeah. So in your childhood, can you share with us what was your rearing like that sort of kind of pointed you to Hawaiian language, singing, perhaps cooking, community service, you've had to have been exposed to it somehow to continue it. So what were some of the things that you went through, or you remember growing up in your home, that sort of brought you here or contributed to you being in this space?
Yeah, I think two things just to kind of give takeaways to everybody, because that's the mana'o, right? That we all kind of take something of value, is family, hard work, and a sense of belonging. So family, hard work, and I think the pursuit of belonging. How's about that? So my step family, the Embernate family from Honaka'a, they are, they're non-Hawaiian. They didn't speak Hawaiian, but they grew up in that mixed plantation, sugarcane plantation style life along the Hamakua coast. My late grandfather, he worked at Hamakua Sugar Company, and they were active in sports, but they always had their hand in the ground. Like I remember helping my grandma at her ginger farm, and then she wanted to farm something else, and just laundry baskets and baskets of ginger, scrubbing them with all her like beauty products. And she's like looking at me like, that's the wrong brush. It's like, what are you doing? That's the wrong laundry basket. This one is for the clothes. This one is for the ginger. And then my ohana Kainoa, my family from Kohala, Waimea, that's the Hawaiian side. They're again hardworking. We have about, I think it's 300 acres along the slopes of Mauna Kea. If you go past Ahualoa, go, past the Andrades, you kind of have to go through several gates, and then finally you get to our family's pastoral land, Hawaiian homelands. And it's been in our family a long time, but it's along in a place called Nie Nie. So yeah, that's kind of like what my Uncle Jingles, who's the second eldest, after my late grandmother on that side, they still running the pasture and all the cows and just really taking care. And you can really see that, Uncle Jingles, I mean, he's been a rock star foreman and cowboy for Parker Ranch, Kahua, and, extended family like Uncle Kimo Ho'opai. So that's the two sides. I'd say that embodied the hard work that somehow trickled down into me, from like how you wash your dishes, you do your bed, you wear your clothes, feed the dogs. And so, like that was embedded in the whole
So
ohana.
you said family, hard work, and then you said something, sense of belonging,
Yeah, the pursuit of belonging.
the pursuit of.
Yeah.
Can you speak to us about that?
Yeah. So, I grew up not knowing my biological father, and I kind of learned that early on. It was a new concept for me, and my parents were young, my stepfather and my mother, right? And so they were kind of, when you're a parent, you, you're your own ha'avina, you're your own lesson, and you learn as you do. As you do, you will learn. And every other parent will have their own experience, but I think this was a special case. And the more I grew, the more I was able to kind of consume about what happened between my mother and my biological father. It wasn't till my junior year, I think, at Kamehameha, when I was at Kapala Mano Oahu, I went to Maui and stay with my friend. Funny thing is, his first name is Kainoa. And I had a dream right before we went back to the airport, and this was spring break. And I woke up and I asked this auntie, I was like, hey, you know any Castaneras or Castañeras? That's my biological last name of my father's side. And she's like, yeah, I get one small little Filipino man. We all call him Papa Castanera. He lived on the one tin roof and he's a taro farmer. I was like, that's so weird because I just had a dream. And like, the hearsay in my ohana on the Kainoa side is that, sometimes you get Grandma Kainoa's gift. You can dream of certain things and people come visit you only in the dream, Other people, they actually feel like the bed pressed down, or when you're cooking, you feel like a cool breeze, or you smell gardenias or maile, like different kind of things. But mine is, so I dreamt and I asked the auntie and she drove us down. And sure enough, Papa Castaneda came out. I didn't know who this man was, right? And here's like the small little Filipino man speaking nice, beautiful, like real pure English. You would expect the kind Filipino accent. No. And he started crying and he goes, Kainoa boy, and I was like, whoa, chicken skin moment. And so he takes me in the house, and this is what it blew my mind. Along the hallway, I saw pictures of me in my Winnie the Pooh like onesie, and like as I was getting older, up to like age, I would say 3. It was before school. I knew that. And he sat me down on the table and he put me on the phone with my biological father, and it was awkward. I didn't know if I was upset. I didn't know if I was happy, but I knew that I was like, that was the first level of feeling, like experiencing, like, whoa, belonging. Like I belong to this guy's loins at one point. And here, one generation over, is my papa, who I just dreamt about, which is like weird. Like that was a major dreaming experience for me that manifested like that. And that's not a regular for me. It happens once in a great while, but that was the first.
That value of that piece that you shared with, and it's quite personal. Yeah, in even in the Hawaiian world, that would be considered very, very personal. But these days, we're finding that we have to share these stories because we have sometimes when you come from these dreaming families, they can support you. But sometimes when the families get colonized and they get removed from the practice, then you have a mo'opuna that can do this, but there's nobody that can support them. So sometimes the support is coming from outside of the family. And so thank you, first of all, for trusting us to share the story with us. But when we're looking at this story in the light of the academic journey. Oftentimes, you know, we're getting people to understand that our students are not just coming to get degrees and certificates. They're looking for their voice. They're looking for a sense of belonging, the pursuit. We need to belong. And what I do know is that when people don't belong, whether in the academics or in the social structures, then a lot of horrible things can happen. That belonging does come with a sense of, you know, a structure, a support system, and a community. So we find that sometimes one of the things that we have to do in the university system, and Gail is one of them, is create the sense of belonging, create spaces in academia in a very foreign landscape, create a place where you can get family. There's a sense of family. Families are defined differently now. So it's not just biological anymore. Now it's even academic. And then you have a sense of belonging. I mean, in my own journey, my family had no clue that, you know, going to college was not, that was only for rich white people. That's what they used to say. So they told me I had no business there. You know, I was being mahaoe, I was trying to act haole. That's what they used to say.
Wow.
But there, lo and behold, you have your own people there. And so you come together and you support each other where your family can't support you. But I like the need of that sense of belonging. And so if we have any of the students, you know, that are here in this room here, or faculty and staff that work at the university, we can look at Kainoa's story, you know, and that's the idea of the dream. People dream to belong. They really do.
It was like 1 year before my graduation from Kamehameha. I was on AP, not the good AP. I was like on academic probation. Hello. And I was freaking out. I was like, who's going to show up for me? You know, who's going to do this? Because Kamehameha has their whole thing, you know, and I was just already kind of feeling like, am I going to graduate? Am I going to make those people proud? But I think it was in the pursuit of belonging for maybe all of us. You know, I think it has to start with some yearning or some interest, some kind of intention. Because if there's a sense of belonging, it's out there. But if you don't want it, you know, and pull it to you, it's not going to really vibe with you. If, you know, that's the word, the trigger word.
And we're talking about ka'au, you know, that was Hope Pele's, you know, Pele had this longing. And, you know, our story says she's from Kahiki. And she kind of outlived her carbon footprint there. And she was longing something beyond what her people could provide her. So her mother told her to get on a canoe and search out her father. Interestingly, in the world of ka'au, you search out your father. In other words, the mana'o okela, you search out for your purpose in life. And so it's interesting that to your advantage, you still had the dreaming was still part of the biological processes that you and perhaps some of your cousins may have, you know, inherited from the ancestors. So that played really well. But yeah, just stepping and then going into the hallway. You know, I'm mythologizing now, and you see all your incarnations in the hallway. What is the hallway for? The hallway is to transition us from one point of the house into another point of the house. So the hallway is like a birth canal, you know, and so that's
his went straight
beautiful.
To the kitchen too. His went straight to the kitchen. I was like, whoa! And he sat me down. He fed me. Like that was the first thing he did, and then he put me on the phone with my father.
Yeah, gotta feed you first. Yeah, gotta feed you first. Oh my. Okay, so that was your hua, your ha'alele. At what point did you begin to think that you would like to do something different? That you looked around and, you know, you maybe appreciated this and that, and maybe you worked here and you worked there, but there's something else. You had to talk about learning, yearning. You had a yearning to do something different. Can you put your finger on a time when you said, I need to get out. I need to do. I need to get in this canoe. There's a shore that I need to arrive on, and I'm not sure where that is. You know, you want to step into your own life.
Yeah, I think it was, and this is a shout out to both of you, because if, you know, like I don't know if you guys know, maybe I've never acknowledged it because I never really put it out there before I left, but Auntie Gail, in creating the Kipuka Native Hawaiian Student Center, not only offered me a place to work, but I wanted to go to Chapman University and study video production. And like, because my parents went through a divorce and whatever, I had to go ʻŌlelo. And I was like, oh, so I was looking for a quick major, and then, Ginger Hamilton was helping me, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna declare? And then, it's like a little hub that we had at Kipuka, and it really was a Kipuka, because I was like, oh, I don't like go home. I don't like go class. I don't like sleep in the dining room. And then, here's Auntie Gail. And then when you folks launched the Aya Hawaii series, oh my gosh, even though I never attend all of them, I was kind of watching and reading everything, and then seeing the people that was attracted to this kipuka, and then all the extensions when Pani moved his office, and Tapodi folks came, and I mean, like Misaki, like I was like, wow, this is different, and so that's one part that started me thinking like, okay, outside of a framework that was intended for me to learn as an undergraduate, I was like, okay, extracurricular, maybe let's call it. And then when I enrolled in Tapodi's class in Papa Ohana, I mean, talk about a space. It was still kind of general ed feel, because you're signing up, you're like Papa Ohana Hawaii level 100, and you're like, oh, this is gonna be great. I hear good things about this guy. Yeah. And then you go, and one of my favorite ha'awina was when you had to design a ho'oleva, when you had to design from start to finish, what would a memorial or a funeral service. And I keep going back to my PowerPoint, and I'm like, wow, like that really made me feel, it challenged me. I had to kind of like shift some stuff around. I didn't know what it was. And I was like, this guy really is like standing for something. I was like, I don't know how to explain it right now, but I'm sure I'll figure it out later on. So that was that. And when I actually stamped my first kihei, well, I did one with Kumukia Franda at Kukulukumohana in Waipio one summer. But the whole process of esoteric imaging and design and balance and negative and positive space on a kihei, on this garment, and conversations we had with Taupori about, yeah, like you can go Ben Franklin and you can get this, throw me in your dryer, and you can make light. And I thought to myself, like, wow, I don't have to go find a kukui nut and go crush it just to belong to a community that wears this kind of garment. And like, I'm just in level 1 Hawaiian. Like, I can wear this kihei because I thought only kumus can wear kihei. And then I remember how he had framed, and it felt like I'm being responsible for you having future conversations about why and how you wear this kihei. And from that point on, I still kind of masticate that and give it to my haumana about like, there's different intentions of different kihei. Some have mana, and this is a spectrum. Some have mana and some have no mana at all. Like, it's just super surface, but it really is inside the intention, the process, and its completion, and then its legacy. So that's what I really want to acknowledge in front of everybody, because it makes a difference about Taupori and Auntie Gail's contribution to me of many people. But I'm trying to get to the point to how Nani Bernardino was, like, in this context of ʻŌlelo and cooking. She was the one that like broke my heart and gave me aloha, like at the same time. And I feel like, even in sexual experiences, like those are and when you eat something or when you say something in ʻŌlelo and the person gets it, there's like a climactic moment where you live and die at the same time. And you're just like, and maybe people call it climax. I don't know what it is, euphoria, but she constantly had this like energy about her that she was like celebrating my efforts, but at the same time critiquing them heavily. I would never win and I would never lose. And that was the limbo I always like existed with her. And the moment that, she told me she didn't have a lot of time because she passed from cancer, it just broke my heart. Like I didn't think I was going to learn Hawaiian. I didn't grow up speaking Hawaiian. I went to this college because they were pumping out teachers. I was thinking job security because that's what everybody was talking about. And I thought, I didn't think social media would make ʻŌlelo big. I'm thinking, okay, just do something, get a job and help the ohana, like, because you obviously failed at going elsewhere, right? So it was kind of like that shuffle. But what I found with her is similar to how Auntie Gail, you know, navigated and spearheaded this space called Kipuka, which really still lives up to its name, and how Taupori, within the prescriptive framework of the tertiary institution, was able to personalize my learning experience in a lasting and meaningful way. How Nani, I feel like, was like the triangle to that. It was like there was an energy. You know how people say, like, you can steal from an artist, you can redo it, but you'll never be that artist, or you'll never be that hula, you'll never be that kumu. It's the person that makes that experience. That I would say about her. Like it, and like, I think when I stood at Kauai Ha'o Church, because her family had asked me to receive the lei that all of the people, you know, grieving her came, and there was like musicians and boys choir, children's choir, women's choir. I mean, students and students. Kauai Ha'o Church was packed. The line was loaded, and all you could smell was like flowers and flowers. And I remember, like, halfway through the procession, I'm standing next to Haunani's ashes, and like I I just coughed, and I like coughed up tears, and I was like, wow, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I was gonna hold it together, but I started thinking, like, okay, finish your program, right? You can get your bachelor's in Hawaiian studies, and then go Kahu Viola teacher education program, because you committed, graduate from that, and because you fulfilled half of the credits, go and do the master's in Indigenous language and culture education. I was interested. It wasn't just a need-based thing or a default, something. I was interested, and my friends were doing it, and I wanted job security, because I like most of us say, I want to do something with my degree, right? I spent all that money. People invested so much in me. I don't want to fail them. So that is kind of like my experience about what is that, the genesis of where my
Yeah, the
wheels was
genesis.
turning about leave an institution and just be your own institution kind of thing.
And then you put on the canoe the essentials. If anything, COVID-19 has kind of clarified for us is, the meaning of what essentials are. And so you just described that, there are a lot of contributors, but then, there's certain essentials that you needed to bring on. And it's nice to know, years removed, that we played that part. And I totally forgot that I used to have people do their eulogy, that to
Oh
create
my
their
gosh.
I used to get called by the senior, the dean or whatever. You ask Gail, I used to get into trouble
HR.
because HR, because I'm asking students to enter into some, I worked at a care home while I was in college, and every night I would, mostly every night there was somebody that died, and my job was to prepare them for their next space.
Wow.
And so that was the best job I had, I must say, because it taught me to see life from a greater context. So when I stepped into the classroom, and I looked at my students, I saw kupuna. And if I could give them the magic of, jump starting, plan your life, you know, think beyond being age 20,
Yeah.
think big, what do you want the quality of your life? What do you want your haina of your song to say? What is it that you're leaving behind? What are people going to remember you for? And when I asked the students that, it was interesting, because then you took all this curricula on record activities, courses you got to teach this curricula, but then now it became personalized, because they saw themselves in it. They knew that every step of the way was going to qualify for the kind of life that they were working hard, that it wasn't just a class anymore. It was a little glimpse into the inner world. So that was the magic. But Gail, and Haunani and myself, yeah, we got into all kinds of trouble, because we, as a group of three, we were performing outside of the framework that the university was, at that time, they were not too comfortable to stretch in that direction. And now the University of Hawaii is committed to indigenizing the process. So it's like somebody had to create that, and not that we did, it came from the generations before us, but we were able to contribute, to continue the ball and not drop it. And so, so we're gonna switch back, yeah. We're gonna go from English to Hawaiian and then to my first language, which is Pidgin. So just go for it, guys. Pay attention, look. But he's gonna give us a sample of how Hawaiian language is used in teaching food. Interestingly, I follow him on FB, and I got to see one of his recipes. I've never seen a recipe in Hawaiian language, and I'm like, just seeing a recipe, I was like,
neither have I.
Well, oh yeah, exactly. And look, oh yeah. Okay, so holomua.
Well, I guess before I talk about cooking in Hawaiian, I think my fear was like, get so many people who can speak Hawaiian. And like some of them who I taught, now they're like great professor, and so I'm still in this mindset of like, if you're at these institutions and if you are at a seat of cultural knowledge and power, you're a facilitator of this cultural wealth almost. And so for me, I had constantly have to kind of step down and just be like, okay, and what is your intention? And just stick to it. Just stick to it. Like you ain't trying to do it for anybody else. And really, when I moved to New York to go to culinary school, I was like, hey, I should teach Hawaiian when I go to New York, make extra side money because, I don't like my degree go waste. And of course I had extra side money. I would go out to the bar. I would go eat fancy fine dining, make okay bougie. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll go all the way from ʻŌlelo, treat them. And then, I was like, oh, people feeling a type of way about, me asking them for money. Some people saying, oh, people in New York, you got to charge them more because if it's not expensive, then they don't see the value of it. And I was like, that's so weird to me. And then the other side was like, oh, you got to make them cheap. You know why? Because if it's too expensive, nobody gonna pay. I was like, that's what I used to. Okay, I'm from the Big Island. If it's too expensive, I'm not gonna buy out. So I'm like, okay, like what is going on? And I've made some mentors, and one of them is Roberta Uno Mapuana, and she dances with Kumuviki Ho Takamine, and she basically was like, just do your thing, like silence the noise and just focus and do your thing. So she got me connected with a not-for-profit in New York called Endangered Language Alliance, and they hosted physical space for me to teach ʻŌlelo, and it was great. I charged, and more people started coming out. NYU students, Columbia students, and you started to see their professors come out. It's all kind of people interested in what's going on. They're like, oh, you heard one guy teaching Hawaiian in New York. I was like, I'm not the first guy that was teaching Hawaiian. You get Manuvai Peters, you had people all before that was teaching Hawaiian. And so long story short, the classes, I had a lot of students at one point, and I was like, whoa, I'm showing up late. I think it was in Midtown Manhattan, 18th Street and 5th Avenue, right by the H&M, which I would always go shop at. And I was always late, like going on the subway, because I was living in Brooklyn at one point, then I was living in South Bronx, and then I moved to New Jersey. It was a hot mess, even with a car. I'm like late. So I said, you know what? Let's go online. And this was 2015. And everyone was like, ew, who learns online? Like, nobody does that. And I said, well, we could be the first, like we could do Hawaiian online. And so we started, and people was like, whoa, this is a trip. And fast forward now, all the long time Halo ʻŌlelo students, they're looking like post-COVID, and they're looking at this, they're like, whoa, like this is a trip. Like, I'm so glad a lot of people know how to do these things now. I was like, right, now we have more friends, that we can talk to and make any kind. And, I think that's where I wanted to kind of resurrect Mauna Hape. Mauna Hape was my passion fruit business, my liliko'i butter business in Hilo in 2011. My friend Ha'amaoliola Iona, she lives in Panaeva on Ohu Ohu Street. So right behind her house, she had plenty lilikoi trees. And I said, what? I can sample. So I took fresh lilikoi and I just made some butter and, get plenty kind brands, but it seemed like a lot of friends, they liked it. And it was at ʻŌlelo Christmas fair that I bought my fancy sign. And it was like, oh, bro, mean. I was like, thanks. Oh, no.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was great. And so I was like also doing a diet, NT Liana Honda. I was at one point we were neighbors of Pauilo Mauka, Pauilo Mauka, kalamai. And she kind of shared this diet with me. So I was doing it. And I was like, oh wow. Then I got into Food Network, Cooking Channel, Iron Chef, all of it. I was like, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm kind of burning out teaching at this institution for this organization, at this school, at this college. I'm going to take unofficial sabbatical because I'm not tenured. I'm only a lecturer. I'm going to go far away. Yeah, I'll go come back 1 year. Okay. So 2 weeks. And I sold my whole life, my car, everything. I was living in Lehua Apartments, right past the bridge. Not Wailuku. I forget. Right above the singing bridge by BJ Penn's house, old house. That whole area. What is that? Vai
Wainaku.
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 Look, I'm such a tourist already. Hello. But yeah, and then I ended up in New York. I said, I want to blow my savings and find myself going to the French Culinary Institute. And you have chefs like Jose Andres and Jacques Pepin. They're like the Dumbledores, this culinary Hogwarts. And we're walking and we're like, whoa, and this recipe I'm going to show you, we actually learned from Jacques Pepin. He came to our class, did an omelet or two, carved a tomato rose, and he's like, you guys want dessert? And he made this crepe. So yeah, that's like all of those years in a nutshell. So about this, writing a recipe, I feel like it's like time traveling. First, it's like I think like what am I hungry for? What am I craving? And then after that, I kind of snoop around on social media and old books. I collect so many cookbooks. Like my favorite are from the South and from France and Italy, from southern France. So a lot of my cooking technique I think is based from what I learned in school. But the reason why I say it's like time traveling is because I can look at the dictionary, the Hawaiian language dictionary, choose a word, and I can kind of go down that avenue, look through the newspapers, listen to native Hawaiian language speakers on the tapes. Now it's online, and be like, oh, I see how they use it. But what I'm finding too is like, how am I actually using it? For example, like spatula. The word I think is like, it's some kind of word. You folks can look it up on vehevehe.org. But for a long time, like in my mind, I was calling it hapala. Hapala because I spread it like peanut butter and jelly, whatever I'm doing. So the action I use, I call the tool that. But when I'm cleaning a bowl, like in pastry or culinary or savory, they say like don't waste the product. Scrape everything out that bowl because someday when you own your restaurant, that's cost. That's cost you got to pay for. So I would call it kahi. So I started calling my spatula kahi sometimes, like when we kahi the bowl with poi, or hapala when you got to spread it like peanut butter jelly. And I think I reached out to Iolani Palace, and the aunties there are so gracious. They literally compiled a whole little like literature review and artifact packet for me about years that they had on file, where Kalakaua and whoever else was occupying there hosted these menus, and they hosted these cooks from around the world, from turtle soup to mock turtle soup. And a lot of these menu items I learned in school, and I'm like mind blown. Like, who still eats or drinks beef tea? And it blew my mind. And so I started looking in different newspapers, because if you don't know the different Hawaiian language newspapers, it depended on the editor. They would kind of imbue or influence a little bit maybe with their biases about what would be printed, what would get front page, back page. And so I find recipes there. And even any kind of journal pieces I find of any royal or attendant to a royal. For example, Queen Kapi'olani, when she went to the Queen Victoria's Jubilee, you know, they talk about food and the pa'ina, these meal times, pastimes on the boat, and when they're there in Great Britain. And so I wouldn't say I'm a traditionalist recipe writer or a modernist. I'm kind of like, just make it work. And I think the part, going back to this idea of Mōkaulele, of innovative indigenous leadership, is like being willing to receive feedback. Like if there is, and I always say this, if there is anybody out there, whether in Kauai or whatever moku across Hawaii Pai'aina, that knows something better than me and knows a word of what I'm doing, please, by all means, reach out to me. And it is literally less than 10 seconds of an update that could be a forever of passing this ike along. And I think that is at the heart of my, I guess, what is being perceived as my innovative process of writing recipes and leading, possibly.
So, you know, that is an important feature in just in the academic world, because, you know, going into critical thinking, you know, outside of ourselves, that's difficult. But to critically think of ourselves and our actions, that sometimes, you know, we're not ready to do what the ego responses. And we don't know how to take criticism. Oftentimes, because we come from insecure spaces, you know, anything that we perceive, the teacher begins to challenge us. We see it as, oh, they don't like me. You know, we have a particular way of interpreting that. And if people don't like us, then we have a choice. The polite way for Hawaiians and a lot of locals is you just leave the space. No, don't enter to conflict, especially if they're older than you, just leave. So, you know, this idea of creating a space and opening up the world and say, you know, this is spatula, but when I use it this way, I do it this way, and when I use this way, I call it this. Now that in itself is empowering, because now you're creating your own vocabulary and your own space. And you know how we are in Hawaiian language. Yeah? You know, we used to have if you weren't on the lexicon committee, remember we used to get it. If we create our own words and we weren't officially on the lexicon committee.
I mean, I still get it. I catch so much flack. And you know, I receive it. I get it. I totally accept it, and I'm accountable.
Yeah, and the great thing is we're all, you know, the language itself. I think that's a big thing, knowing that you can be a master of your journey, which means sometimes you have to create your own words or create your own understanding. And even if it means today it means this, and tomorrow, and you know, another exposure of knowledge or experiences might make go, oh, I'll call it this. You know, a case in point. You know, I love Oli chanting, and we took Kalena's class. In Halaokeku, we learned from Auntie Pua. She mostly teaches us chanting, and you just mimic. We didn't play very large in the definition of this style, and you know, the nomenclature that came with it. But you go to the university system, and you know, it's very academic, so you learn all the phrasing, the right this and this and this. And one of those chants, you know, the ones we danced to, it didn't seem to have a place. You know, we tried to like force fit it in this definition and that, and it just didn't seem right. Well, just about a year ago, I'm reading this book that I've been reading since I was in college, you know, my favorite resource book. And this old man, and I believe he was a Kuluvai Maka. Somebody asked him, so what do you call these the chants? What do you call the chants that we dance to? You know, is it Oli Oli Ka Holo? Is it what, you know? And he says, oh no, they're just called Oli Hula. And I'm like, here we were trying to rebuild the pyramid, trying to, you know, we got bashed for trying, and we tried to force fit things because we're so scared to move within, you know, this antiquity of language. You know, it was taken out, you know, a large piece of it was taken away. So when we come to it again, we enter it like, you know, like an elephant in a antique store. We're so scared to move. But eventually, when it becomes a living feature of our lives, you know, you know, I myself had to create new understandings. I created a whole protocol system, and we call it Ki Pai Pai. And because I had to call it something different, because if I just say ho'okipa, then people would ask, how come you're doing it like that? So I just gave another word, and that just opened up a whole possibility. And so I think that's a huge piece of the fear factor, that sometimes in our need to transition old culture into a modern time, sometimes we forget that we got to contribute and we got to grow it. And who says we got to have only one name for spatula? 50 people can have 50 different, terminology. So what are you doing?
So, what I'm doing is I combined a little bit of flour, AP regular flour, and then one egg, one huamoa, and some milk, some bayu. Frenchman, so interesting. It reminds me of some of the kupuna, like when they demo some stuff. It's like no measurement. It's all by na'au. It's all by feel. And if it tastes right, great, do it. It's like, whoa, yes, chef. You're lucky if you get the recipe. And it's just the doing again and again and again. And I think the cooking is like really like ʻŌlelo. You don't know until you just jump in and you just figure it out. And it's a community effort. Like when you're feeding someone, they'll let you know right away if it's good or if it's not good. If you're joining, like I remember when I was a student and then a colleague of Kainoa, we would go and we would take the second year students on these like camping trips down Ka'upulehu. And, the whole trip was in Hawaiian. And the part that a lot of people kind of freaked out about was not only the part where they had to speak with the native Hawaiian language elder speaker person, like Anakala Bilpa Nui, but it was when they had to cook, like watching them try to operate the wok with the propane tank and make fried rice in Hawaiian was hilarious. It was like, wow, like I guess you got to put that one into textbook, like not a living language here, folks, not a living language, and then that's where they figure them out. You start by just saying words here and there, and then people kind of like constellation ʻŌlelo. They put it all together and they kind of get the manao. So just like cooking, I feel like not all of us have the same pan, not all of us have the same equipment, smarts, techniques. We're all at, where we're at, and we just have to accept that, but then somehow bring each other together. So yeah, I don't know. And when Jacques Pepin showed this to us, I was like, oh, I think that's going to be my favorite dessert. And it is to this day. It's so easy. So flour, egg, milk. I put a little bit of salt because salt opens up the ono, and a little bit sugar so it caramelizes. I'm using a nonstick pan. Here's a word I created because I couldn't really find a nonstick pan. So frying pan is pa polite. But for me, when I think about what a nonstick pan does, your food should he'e or he'e. It should be like a octopus, right? It should move. It shouldn't be pa'a. Or like when the Princess Miriam Like talks about the lover that goes over the sand dunes, just like the foam, the wash. So I think like when I see that action, I think he'e, and that's how I kind of he'e, I cheat the food from getting burnt. So there's all these kind of like mo'olelo, these story times, the context of what my thinking is as the potential author, of this recipe. And I'm either gonna get people that say, I see it, or people like, no. At the end of the day, do you want to eat a crepe? And do you know what I'm talking about? We're trying to talk about, like, or are we gonna sit here the whole night? Which is fun. So,
and that's a great thing is as you create your world, then you have, everybody's looking at a pan, but because of their experience with the pan, they bring different, they have different uses, and and those uses interpret in terms and in words. So it'd be interesting to see your lexicon that you've created, and because that's otherwise sometimes we're not going to have those words if somebody don't create them, and that doesn't mean we cannot create our own, but sometimes it's nice to have somebody's informed, the story behind why it is. And so when you look at it, now we look at that frying pan, that's true. It's hey, when things are slipping, in and out of it,
Yeah.
it makes all the sense to me.
Yeah, I remember Jacques Pepin, he always said to us, usually the first crepe goes to the dogs, but I'm like, listen, at Mauna Hape, we don't waste anything because expensive, huh? Flour 99 cents. Oh, expensive. So
Yeah.
consistency too is like tricky, but not tricky. You got to play with it. And that's why measurements is not a real big thing. He says it always should be like really, really like watery, not too thick, because then it would be, the pancake that we're all used to. I would kind of do like a quick version of this kind of crepe that he did with some orange. But still getting used to this. And I feel like I usually cook in my kitchen, obviously, on my stove. But this little thing I bought, and it's cheap, it works. I'm still trying to figure it out. And when I was cooking around in New York City, oh my gosh, from like high level haute cuisine to like low level fast casual, like, hi, what you want? Okay, a burger, great, get out. I would be kind of like noticing and hearing all the managers and chefs say like, oh, when you step to the stove, you got to figure out the hot area and the cold area. You have to learn your pans because they're very temperamental, and it's like, wow, like you really, really have to learn these things. And then you grab it and you just flip them like that.
So it's interesting, what you just described. You got to know the heat. You got to know the hot and the cold. You got to know your pans because they're very temperamental. Isn't that what we got to teach our students when they go and they select their instructors?
Oh my gosh.
You gotta know your instructors. You gotta know the hot and the cold. You gotta know the temperaments of it because we're dealing with human beings. And so even though, the university, we like to convince ourselves that we're very, we're very non-biased, and we're very neutral. There's a lot of human being bias in that university system. And one of the successes of students is figuring out their kitchen. You take the class, you got to figure it out. And so now my youngest daughter too, he is in college, and she's been hearing this speech all her life. She's now beginning to I remember she came and she had this one instructor, and the things I know the instructors because they're from my college, and she was like, oh, this guy just sends this information, it's incomplete and last minute, and it's just all this. And then something happened, and she realized that he was the best teacher we're talking this current semester. I said, what happened? She said, I figured something out. She figured out where the hot and the cold was on that burner, and together they were able to create the best crepes, if I'm to use your crepes as a metaphor. And so that's a big piece of student success, is teaching them that you got to know the hot and the cold, and you got to figure it out. It's not a fixed, a solid, a static ingredient. You got to adjust it to all kinds of conditions, and you'll get the best crepes.
Yeah.
And I'm salivating. Like I'm looking at that. I'm like, where's the butter?
I know. So I'll just make two, and then I'm gonna make a little orange butter, just to kind of glaze it and drizzle it. No more plates, so I'm gonna use my cutting board. That's bad practice. So don't eat from your cutting board, else you're gonna get a couple cracks from your chef in New York City.
Leila, if you can put it in the chat. If you have questions you would like to ask, about his story, about his process, about his recipe, about the what are some of the variables that come into creating new terminology. Hawaii, we're known worldwide for our aloha and support, but there's a part of Hawaii that's extremely volatile when it comes to critiquing, and you see it in the hula world. So but critiquing is necessary, and as Kainoa says, he welcomes a critique. And if at the end of the day you want to eat, you don't want to be spending hours talking about where did the Okina land, and we want to eat. So if you have questions, just just go for it, and if not, it's also fine. Now we're doing butter. Orange.
butter,
Yeah.
sugar. Yeah.
Alani.
Basically, we're making a caramel.
Uh-huh.
So that's like what, about punapa cocoa, 1 tablespoon of paka, of layu
Oh,
of butter. This kind of stuff maybe most people get around their house. But if you folks want, you can join our Mauna Hape cooking community. It's on Facebook, but I'm trying to kind of follow the new trends about what everybody's doing, Clubhouse and this and that. But the idea is that we have I created a Google Doc, which is free to everybody, and I'm writing recipes. It's a free digital Hawaiian language cookbook that I'm just kind of making up. I'm shopping around recipes I like, making them easy, and then putting them in Hawaiian. And yeah, and then you can treat yourself, make them for your ohana. Yeah, easy kind of things. And then I'm gonna va'u the ili of the alani. I'm gonna grate. You folks should really invest in one of these. It's called a microplane. It's great. It's very fine. And this is just a kind of flavor. No, get the white side, huh? Just get the orange side. Hence orange butter.
Yeah, my auntie get one like that. She used them for scrape her calluses off that, you know, her feet.
Treat them.
They look the same thing. Like we. What do they call that? Mōkaulele haole he great he haya.
That's a microplane. Microplane.
A microplane. A microplane.
Yeah.
And you va'u ka ili.
Hi.
Yeah. So
or fine grater.
Ka ili o ka alani.
So once you kind of like how this looks, I'm gonna add a little bit more sugar because I like them a little bit more brown contains. I'm just gonna turn up the heat. No need to stir them, just go like this. And then it's gonna thicken up. And then what you're gonna do is you're just gonna dip your crepes in back and forth and you just plate it and shove it in your face. So yeah, that's about it.
Okay. No leila kako. Wa kanika hola elima. It's 5 o'clock, and you know, if you do have to leave because you have to go make dinner, especially now because now my stomach's growling, please do leave. But you know, keep the conversation going. You know, we have all the contacts in the chat. Keep the conversation going. We highly encourage us to you know, to learn our language, whether it's Hawaiian or something else. You know, open up another language, and another part of your brain will begin to remember. And you know, the more languages we know, the higher the capacity to connect and support globally people with similar value systems. You know, we want to mahalo Kainoa for sharing his story. One, I've known him for a few years, but I didn't know, you know, I didn't know of his dreaming capacity as an, you know, as a trait that is inherited, and how he's tapped into his organics, you know, and he's dreaming and totally trusting his dream, and then doing the right inquiry with people he could trust, because you can have the dream, but other people might have the clues that will help you manifest that dream. So as we look in the, you know, as we apply this to the world of the student, you know, the students have dreams, but sometimes we need to provide the clues and the directions so that the student can end up in that hallway and see themselves, you know, the incarnations of themselves in this passageway. So, you know, that was quite mythical to me. And I use mythology to build student success. And so that made all the sense. The fact that the pursuit of belonging, you know, that it's one thing to belong, it's another thing to, you know, you got to pursue it because perhaps you got to strengthen the bonds, or perhaps there are certain questions that need to be in place. And so, you know, it's not just belonging, but sometimes it's the pursuit of belonging that cause you to really put all your energy into it. I like the fact that you said you sold your life, you know. You just really, it's a little dramatic, you know, that boom, he's out there. And because on one hand, you're talking about job security and starting your life, and the other, you just something happened and you went into the opposite end of the canoe, and you went, and you went into your journey, took you to a foreign land. What I love about foreign lands sometimes is we can test out stuff that wouldn't be as easily tested if we're still at home.
Oh,
So
totally.
sometimes we need to travel. We see ourselves in the context of other spaces, other people's, other stories, other narratives. So, your hua, very similar to many of ours, families that have to reconfigure themselves because of, certain narratives. Then the ha'alele, the point where you need to step into you, who is this you? And that's a scary feeling sometimes, because for the time we come out of our bodies, we're always part of a community. And so when we step into us, sometimes we don't know what to do with that community. Does it displace the community? Or, we got to recreate a new relationship. And then you began your huaka'i, and your huaka'i, you start one, and before you could end it, another one begins, and another one begins. That's how huaka'is go. They never end. But your ho'ina, you've created all of these resources based on your mauna hapa, your passion, your passion baby, your project. And you service a large world, and social media has provided opportunities to even advance that without having been too late to the gig, like not like you have to drive and you have to park in New York. Oh Lord.
Oh man.
But let me look at all of you guys, ladies and gentlemen. Where are we? Exit gallery. Okay, so as I look at all of you, I see faculty, I see staff, I see administrators, I see students. Kainoa, so when you see Mauna Hape, when you see him on FB, when you see halau, halau ʻŌlelo, or if you have the chance to taste his crepes, you already know that, did that come out wrong?
Well,
But in
you know
any
what,
case,
folks? But for real, the ultimate goal, when I'm ready to come back to Hilo, the original goal was to leave Hilo, come back, open up restaurant. And so part of this, top secret I'll let all of you folks in, is when I come back to Hilo, is that I actually manifest Mauna Hape. And because we're from the Big Island and we love our mountains, why not create Mount Happy, a place where we all can come together and just kind of eat and be happy and talk story. And so I'd love to open my little bakery, maybe a 2-seater, grab and go. But yeah, that's the dream, to open up Mauna Hape in Hilo.
So, whenever we find ourselves at Mauna Hape and we're going to be sitting down and, we're tasting the crepes, but it's going to even be more ono, because we know that behind the crepes is this huge story, this journey. And sometimes a little bit shaky, unsure, but, it all contributes to the ono. And then you meet this world brilliant, kupua cooks, that you only see on television, and you see that they're human on the television. You see that they're deity and their rights, but when you meet them face to face, you know that they too have similar stories. And so that's the whole thing. Share your stories. Kainoa's one might be centered currently on cooking, but I would like to ask you, what story, where is your story centering on? Please don't give up your stories. There's nothing to say we can pick up another person's story and read, but the sin comes to play when we don't pick up our own stories, and we always feel that somebody else's stories is a seller and not our own.
Yeah.
So, please, put narrative to your story. People coming to the university, they're really looking. We've been telling stories much longer than we've been in the university system. The history of the university system is in its infant stages when it comes to the larger gamut of the intellect of the human being. We use storytelling to speak to our truths, to speak to our dreams and our adventures. So we have to, Mōkaulele is about. Somebody says, Mōkaulele is just like when we were young. My grandfather, them always used to tell stories. All the old people used to tell stories in the evening time. Well, I guess I'm the old person now. But isn't it great that we can get hooked for a little while? We can get hooked onto the story of one of our people, and in listening to their stories, we begin to listen to our own. Kainoa, me oi ku mahalo nui loa. And oh na. Yeah, it's like, whoa. Oh, kanani. You see that? Wow. That is he onoloa. See,
Yeah,
I don't know. This is getting hot.
I'll use my finger.
So how much recipes have you written down yet? You've published or you put in a Google? How much do you have at current?
I only did like 5, but I have like 50. I know, okay. But I'm just trying to finish my PhD.
And look at that. That's another chapter. Great. And your PhD is in where?
It's at Capella University. It's in the School of Education, and then specializing in instructional design for online learning. And this was before COVID. So now it's like, whoa, high demand.
High demand. Mauna Hape might be delayed, and coming back home. But anyway, that's all right. Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. You have a large calling, and I think we all have large callings, but some of us listen to it with a little bit more fervor. So, do what you need to do, because sometimes we need to have these big performers so that we can create our baseline for ourselves. We need leaders. And so thank you for allowing us to project leadership upon you and what you're doing. I hope it's a small world, so we'll be hooing again. But ladies and gentlemen, again, do we have any questions? What is your FB page called? Somebody said?
Mauna Hape.
Mauna Hape. Can you put that can you check that too? Oh, there it is. Mauna Hape right there. And then
Mauna.Hape.
It's Mauna.Hape.
Yeah. Boom.
Okay. Mahalo. Yeah, there's a kamea I kakau ia oia ka mahalo he nui. Yeah. Okay. Mahalo. So next week, is it next week? Next week is April 1st. Yes. Our guest will be Keli'okalani Makua. And he's going to be sharing with us his story that led him to what we call a kahunauhi, or a specialist in tattooing. So, and again, it's always about, at the end of the discussion, it translates into student success. And because we're all students, even if we're administrators and faculty and staff, we're all students. Let us continue learning from each other. And thank you again. I really like the idea. If anybody has a better word I could use, just let me know.
Hit me.
Yeah. And so thank you for your humility and your humbleness. Gail, thank you. You've given birth to some great stories, Gail. Mahalo nui. Yeah. Look, I just have pulled myself out of that one. Yeah, I'm still a little dramatic in my classrooms. Whenever we still have classrooms, I love to play. Drama has a space, and sometimes it's nice to use drama to get people to look at the hard corners of their life. And so, because we got to look at in those areas too. But thank you all for spending your evenings with us. Noel, Wu, O'Brien, thank you for getting us together. Noel, Tagab Cruz, thank you for hosting this together with Gail Makuakane London. Again, my name is Taupori Tangaro, and I want to just mahalo Kainoa. It's people, we're seeing the sunset on our profession, and when we seeing that, our sun might be setting, but the little contributions we've made to individuals has seeded and is growing. It makes us smile deep inside, and so thank you for making me smile, Kainoa. Mahalo anui. Ahui ho no kako. Okay.
Mahalo.
Bye bye. Hey, mahalo Kainoa.